All right. Well, welcome everyone. For anyone who I haven't met, my name is Takesha, and I have been part of the LiveWell team since the very early days whenever we were just dreaming about all this stuff. And I'm super excited to be hosting my first deep dive tonight. And I am thrilled to introduce you to our new friend, Katie Hobson, who will be chatting with us tonight about breathwork. Katie is a multi-passionate stay-at-home mama to 4 kiddos, living her best life by the powerful motto, give the pain a purpose. In addition to all the incredible work she does, her other passions include, but aren't limited to, making friends, writing, reading, nature, chill giving quotes, personal development work, music, and dance parties, and the list goes on. Katie is the founder of a body-based, heart-centered, trauma-informed membership for women, empowering them on their healing journeys. Additionally, she holds a certification as a trauma-informed healing and breathwork coach, bringing a wealth of knowledge and experience to help others harness the power of breathwork for healing and well-being. She is joining us tonight to share her wisdom and insights on the transformative practice of breathwork. Please join me in giving her a warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about what is breathwork and how is it different from just regular, you hear all the time, deep breathing or meditation and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and this is really probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I do run into, is when people hear breath work, they instantly think of sort of that deep, the cleansing breaths you do in meditation, or like pranayama, something that you do in yoga, right? And those are all different kinds of breath work, right? Because anytime that you're intentionally altering the breath, it's breath work. The kind of breath work that I do, though, is fully somatic, in the sense that we're inviting in specific breath patterns that are designed to do certain things in the body. And we do it so we'll start usually with, it's a whole journey, right? So there are different kinds of journeys. There's an integrative and a meditative. And the integrative journeys last about 30 minutes, and the meditatives are around an hour, but that's not all active breath. So there's just like what I call the landing phase, where you're sort of dropping in. And then there's where we actually invite in whatever the breath patterns are going to be for that journey. And that's when we start the active breath, right? And so for an integrative breath, that means anything up to 8 minutes of active breathing. Okay. And a meditative breath is anything past that point, right? And once you get to that 8-minute mark, 8 to 10 minutes, is where we really start to see people dropping out of that structured mind into the body. Mm. And that's where we start to really, and so that's when you have those sort of like altered states of consciousness, right? That's where you can get there with that. And even the integrative journeys where you breathe maybe 3 to 5 minutes can be insanely powerful.
So when you're talking about structured breathing, is it like so many seconds in, so many seconds out? Do you like control the pace of how much it's coming out?
So it depends on the pattern. It depends on the different breath pattern that we're doing. Usually the kind of breath work that I'm trained in is trauma informed. Mm-hmm. And that means that I'm always applying the lens of trauma to everything that I do. And that also means then, in that same breath, that the breather is sovereign. Mm-hmm. And so that one of the things that I speak to before every single breathwork journey is that if, you are Q1, you and your body as the breather, you're Q1 and I'm Q2. So I'm here to hold space. And if there's anything that I invite you to do that doesn't feel good in your body, don't do it. Right. So no, not really. I don't really, I invite breathers to find their own pace and their own rhythm and depth and cadence and all of it.
That's awesome. What inspired you to become a breathwork instructor? How'd you learn about it? And
gosh. So I started first with the trauma work. And I started at first to heal myself. I had been doing healing work since for years. And I had been doing, inner child work and shadow work. And I love all of that so much. And I still had so much trauma, so much trapped energy and trapped emotions in my body that were just there that I wasn't even aware of. And I ended up having the panic attack of all panic attacks, and I thought I was dying. And I was alone with my children, and I called my husband. He, rushed. We called like ambulance and everything in the back of an ambulance, thinking that I was literally dying. And yeah, it was a severe panic attack. And then I had them for like every other day. I was having them, and they were debilitating. Like my mom was having to watch my children while my husband was at work. It was so debilitating. And that is when I was like, this is enough is enough. Like it's time to stop running from these things that I have suppressed and pushed down for so long. And so I got into trauma first, and I did my first trauma informed certification, and that was for my coaching. And then honestly, the way that I filmed breathwork, I never had really any interest in doing breathwork. And I ended up on a master class with one of my mentors, and she breathed us, and it rocked my world. And I couldn't explain what was pulling me to it, other than like it was a full, like my whole body was just vibrating, and I knew it was for me. So I just did it and fell in love with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, next on our plan, I know we talked before about how we could both kind of geek out forever on the science behind it all. So let's hear a little bit about how the breath work. We talk all the time about the nervous system with our wellness and healing journeys. So how does breath work affect the nervous system, and why is it so important in moving that trapped energy and trauma healing?
Yeah. I actually love the way you worded this question. So we move energy in 3 ways. We move energy with breath, with noise, and with breath, with noise, and with sound. Oh, wait, with sound, I can't think of the other one right now because I'm spacing because I'm nervous. What is
Is it
it?
movement, maybe?
It's movement, is it? I like felt like I had already, I don't know. So yeah, it's movement. It's body movement, and breath and noise. And so when we are in an actual breathwork journey, you can invite in every single one of those, right? You're breathing, you can tone on the exhale to activate that vagus nerve, and you can move. I move a ton when I'm breathing, especially if I'm in an integrated breath and I'm sitting up. So I do a lot of like this, and it just helps move the energy out, right? As far as how it helps the nervous system, it's so many different ways. One of the main ways, especially with the patterns that I use a lot. So we're basically intentionally activating the sympathetic system with some of these breathwork patterns. So for instance, one of the patterns that I go to for the first pattern, I do a lot of breath choreography. So we'll move through like holds and different patterns. But as far as a kick us off kind of pattern, we do what's called the triactive breath. And so it's 2 inhales all through the mouth, and then exhale through the mouth. And when we're doing that mouth breathing, right, that's going to activate that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, and it's right. So it's kind of, and you get to choose your pace, and that's kind of where it ends up, right? So the first breath is into the belly, the second into the chest, and then out through the mouth. And that is going to activate the fight and flight response in us. And it's important because when we do this in a container, right, where we're being held and it's safe and it's controlled, and we have a guide, someone there who can say, hey, you're okay, you're good. And in person, there's touch points that we can use in person. And then you bring it back down, right? So in that way, you're widening your window of tolerance, which is your body's capacity to withstand activation in the body, right? So that's one way. Another way I'll geek out if I go too much into it. So there's something called a physiological sigh, right?
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
when you do an inhale and then you take another inhale, sort of a little bit of a shorter one. Some people do 2 full inhales. For me, that's taxing for some people.
mhm,
So I usually tell people, get to where it feels like you're about to be full, pause for a second, and then finish. And that second inhale, when we are when stress is building in our bodies, that basically what's happening is the CO2 level is rising in our blood and in our lungs.
mhm,
And when that happens, we have these little air-filled sacs in our lungs that start to deflate. And so our capacity for holding oxygen is compromised in
mhm,
that way. Um, and so with that second inhale on the physiological side, you're actually filling the lungs with the first inhale. With the second one, it's re-inflating those air sacs. And
mhm,
then there's like part of the physiological sigh is a really long extended exhale. And
mhm.
what you're doing with that extra long exhale through the mouth, you're offloading CO2. So you're pulling in more capacity for oxygen while you're leveling back out that CO2.
That kind of makes me think of like when I'm really anxious. I feel like sometimes one of the ways I know is it's harder to get a full deep breath in. Is that kind of what you're talking about, where there's not that proper balance there?
That's it. That's 100% it. Mhm.
Mhm. Is there anything else you would like to say more about the science behind this?
Um, well, in the same way that the physiological sigh helps with the CO2 level, breath holds do the same thing. They help us, they train us actually. Just in the same way that I was talking about that the activating breaths train us to withstand that activation in our body. When we do breath holds, we're intentionally throwing off the body's level of CO2. And so it's another way to just like you're training your system.
Mhm.
So
So for the first thing you talked about, you're kind of talking about how like we have this window of tolerance and you can get either overactivated or go down into the freeze. And with the breath work patterns, you're trying to kind of gently shift yourself into activation and then back into that calm state to kind of help widen that. Is that correct? Cool.
yeah.
Awesome. So tell us about a specific example, if you have one, of an experience that you've had with a person working as a coach or in your training with breathwork and somebody else's transformative healing experience.
Okay. So there are obviously a ton to speak to, like emotionally. I always think it's really, really cool when people have physical things that are healed from
Mhm,
this work. So I'm going to speak to that. I had it's funny because it's actually the first person I ever breathed, and she's one of my best friends. And I was really nervous about breathing her because we knew each other so well. And it's such a power dynamic, like it's a power balanced friendship, right? So it felt like, how am I supposed to go in and be the expert here?
mhm,
And then of course I did and went in and it felt like such a gift to be able to share. It like hit me, actually, no, you get to do this, right? Like you get to share this beautiful transformative work with the people that you love the most in the world. And she happened to be, so we breathed that first time. It was huge for her. And then we kept going. And she was I would say about after our second breathwork journey, she uncovered some repressed trauma and had also been dealing with other trauma and at the time, and that trauma brain just fully set in, and it actually started to affect her vision, to where the way she describes it is that she was seeing in grayscale, which is the only, as far as trauma goes, the only thing that I've been able to see is that like traumatic brain injuries can cause this. um Anyway, she was having this experience where she was seeing sort of in grayscale or shades of gray. And then she would breathe and she could see colors. And it, like after we had a journey, And she opened her eyes and she just busted into tears, sobbing because she could see colors again. And I get like really checked up thinking about that. And I had another friend who.
Can I pause you right there before you go to the
Yeah.
next thing? Because I don't want to forget the questions I have for that. So
Yeah.
that story makes me think of a lot of times we have people come and try out new experiences like yoga, meditation, things like that they've never tried before. So what kinds of things can you do to kind of like prepare someone for what they're coming into? And are there a lot of like kind of extreme experiences like that might be really scary for somebody? How do
No,
you kind of
right. So she was dealing with trauma going into this when she uncovered the repressed trauma, right? And what we do is we start off slowly. Like I wouldn't jump somebody into a meditative breath. Again, it's trauma-informed breath. So another misconception of breath work is there's people who practice it. I was going to like give examples, but I'm not going to do that. Actually, there are people who practice it and encourage the breather to like push through the resistance, go past the resistance, and that can be very re-traumatizing for somebody who especially is dealing with active trauma.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, she went into it knowing like I'm going to keep going. She made the choice, right? Because she had been doing enough work to where she felt she had the capacity to handle that at that time, right? We talk a lot about taking sips. It's like taking sips of breath work. So essentially, I would never just drop someone into one of those longer ones. I would start someone with maybe 3 to 5 minutes of active breath.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's going to have, I can't say no one would. And it's very unlikely that someone would have that sort of response from 3 to 5 minutes of breathing, right? Honestly, it's pretty unlikely that anybody would have that sort of response until they've been sort of doing it for a minute.
So it's kind of more
like
you're
pulling the
guiding
pressure.
yourself toward that understanding that you're
Yeah.
gonna push a little further.
But as far as preparing people, at the beginning of every single journey that I do, I go over this whole spiel that I have basically that talks about what the fact that when we're consciously shifting our breath like this, we're altering the pH of our blood. So there's going to be physical responses. And when you're moving energy to that degree, you can also have emotional things come up, right? And that's the point. We want to release the trauma from the body. But yeah, so we talk about like for instance, there's something called tetany.
Is that the hand thing? I was about to ask about it.
Yeah. So did I tell you about that when we talked?
No, I've read about it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when that pH of the blood shifts and there's that off balance of CO2 and everything like that, right? There can be something that happens called tetany, and it's a normal response. It's a totally normal response. It's basically the involuntary contraction of smooth muscle. So your hands can get like this or like this or like this. Your feet can do it. It can also happen around your mouth. So your mouth can kind of go like this, and it feels almost stuck like that. It's not though, right? And if that happens, and I always speak to this specifically before we go into breath, because it is a little alarming if you don't know what it is, right?
Yeah.
If you
Does
don't
it feel
know,
like a cramp? Because that's what I envision. Is it like painful? Like if you are
no, it's not painful. It's not painful at all. It gets like tingly. You'll have tingling sensations are just a common thing that can happen when you're breathing anyway. So you get tingly, and it just feels like the first time it ever happened to me, I was in a meditative breath. This is probably not going to happen in an integrative breath because you're not breathing for long enough to really have that response. But the first time, so my hands were right here actually, and my fingers just sort of went like this and got like stuck like that. But I knew what to expect. Yeah, so it didn't scare me.
Awesome.
And sorry, just really quick. if something like that happens in the breath, I
Mhm.
always say this before too. If like, okay, so part of this work, part of what we want to do here is find our edge and play with it, right? So because we want that transformation. And back to the agency, back to the sovereignty that the breather has. Only you can decide, okay, maybe this is just a little bit of discomfort for me, or no, this is my edge and I don't want to go any further. And if you get to that point, all you have to do is release the breath. And within minutes, your body will be normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you can kind of speak to about what happened during a breathwork session and what it kind of looks like? Or like, is it seated usually? Is it lying down? Does it depend on the journey?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The integrative journeys can be either. You can do either. You can sit or you can lie down. And the meditative journeys, I won't breathe anyone unless they lie down, especially if it's on Zoom, because these days I do a lot of my work on Zoom, and especially on Zoom, because if someone does get lightheaded, because this is, we're really doing a lot of work with our breath here. So if someone gets lightheaded or falls over or anything like that, they need to be lying down, right? For that. That's not going to happen in an integrative breath usually, unless there are other health things going on. And so that's another thing is I have people fill out health forms before breathing them so that I know, do we have, say, a history of seizures or stuff like that.
Right.
Does
How
that
often
answer?
do you do? Yeah, I think so. Do you do more one-on-one breath work or groups? Can it be done in a group?
Yes, groups are magic. That group field, that energy that happens in breath work and groups, it is so juicy and so good and magic. One-on-one can be really powerful too. It's really sort of up to the breather, up to what level of comfort they have as far as being experienced and process, right? Because some people are not comfortable with that yet, and that's okay. And one-on-one, they're just more comfortable being able to fully, because some people laugh out loud in the middle of a session, or some people scream, right, and cry. It just depends on what has been trapped inside of you for a really long time that needs to come out.
Do you
Yeah.
have to kind of go into a breathwork session with the intention of like, do you set intentions and like you're planning to try to like let energy flow? And is there ever a type, I feel like I'm asking multiple questions in one, but are there ever the type of breathwork sessions that you do where it is just like more of like, I'm trying to do like a calming exercise, or is it always this powerful energy moving, intense stuff?
Yeah, no, it's both. It's whatever you need it to be, right? So the integrative sessions are not always going to be like super intense,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't mean they can't be transformational. I think another misconception is that intensity equals transformation, especially in breath work. This is a common, and it's wrong. It's so dead wrong. Okay. So it doesn't have to be. I don't ever throw someone who's new to breathwork into the super intense stuff, because I don't feel that that is a very trauma informed approach to breathwork. Like just dropping you in and totally blasting you to like the sky, right? That's not good for some people. And you have to sort of figure out other people's systems and, uh, you know, which is all about like a lot of the training that I did was about like energetic, being able to really pick up on other people's energies, and just from sight alone being able to spot when someone's becoming potentially activated to a point to where they might need some additional support.
Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of, we've talked a lot about trauma informed and creating a safe environment, are there any other things that you kind of do to make it more comfortable for people if they're kind of scared of what it's going to be like?
Yeah. So especially in person, there's a ton that we can do to make the environment is crucial. It's a really big deal. It makes it, you know how people say like location, location, location. It's like environment, environment. It's the same thing, right? It's everything, because that is also our energetic space. So in person, I am pretty likely to either sage or do something beforehand. And if I saged, I would want everyone's approval, because that's a sort of strong scent. So if I burn candles, anything like that, it's going to be like a light scent, very light scent, because some people are so sensitive to smells. Um, Sometimes I'll
People.
bring, huh?
I said I'm one of those people. I can.
Yeah, it's really common. And so sometimes I'll also bring my diffuser and diffuse oils, because there are some that are less, anyway, so scents, and then like lighting can be a good thing. I always tell people, if you have a blanket or a pillow or something that is significant to you that instantly brings you comfort, bring it, right? And crystals, I use a lot of crystals. I believe in the power of crystals, and I know a lot of people think it's super woo woo. I don't. And what else do I use? And then music. And then honestly, a lot of it's like the tone of your voice can, like when I'm in session, when I'm breathing people, that alone can make a big difference in how safe they feel.
Mhm.
Um, and then in person also, like I said earlier, there are certain aspects of touch, which I always ask for consent beforehand. Like when we're getting ready to drop in and everyone's eyes are already closed, I'll say like, hey, let me know, raise your hand if you would prefer that I don't touch you at all. Like if it comes up, I don't go around just touching people for the heck of it, right? But if I notice someone's activated, there are ways that I can come to them, and that's co-nourishing, that co-regulation between systems, and touch is a really big part of that. So that's another thing that can be offered in person. And if it's online, it's really, really, really up to the breather.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So talking about that co-regulation and the connection with another person and seeing what somebody's going through kind of leads into the question, is this type of breath work something that you can learn over time on your own and do on your own, or is it better to have with a guide? And are there ways that people can incorporate it into their self-care plan?
Yeah, it's such a good question too. 100% you can do this on your own, right? I wouldn't suggest like being like, I'm going to go try this pattern that I've never tried before, and I'm going to breathe for 12 minutes straight, right? Would not suggest that for sure, unless you have somebody in the house with you who knows what you're doing and is aware, so that they can come and check on you and all of that, right? Especially so the integrative journeys, the ones that are up to 8 minutes of active breathing, those are called integrative journeys because those are meant to be used in day-to-day life to integrate into your life in a way that makes sense, because all of us are so busy and most of us don't have, say, an hour to sit down and breathe every day. So, and doing just 3 minutes of breath a day, even if you don't want to do an activating breath, say you want to sit down and you want to sigh for 3 minutes, physiological sighs for 3 minutes, just 3 rounds of physiological sighing has been shown to tremendously decrease stress in the body. So that's 3 rounds. That's 3 times,
Mhm.
right? Um, so yeah, that sort of thing, 100% is, I wish every single person in the world would take 3 to 5 minutes a day to breathe. It would be a very different world. Very
Do you
different world.
have a favorite breath pattern that you use?
Yeah, mine is actually, it's called a halo active breath, and it's very similar to those deep cleansing breaths. It's in through the nose, out through the mouth. The difference here is that it's rhythmic. You want to keep it sort of looping. You get to choose how long and drawn out you want the in breath and the out breath to be. You get to choose all of that. Just keep it looped. That's a good one. That's it. It's a really good one for beginners too, because there are other breaths like the blow breath where we're let's see if you can see my belly in this, where it's like you're snapping the stomach in and it's all through the mouth. I'm gonna put my hand on my stomach so you can see it, but it's a forceful exhale, passive inhale. So you're not trying to think of the inhale. So it's, you see my belly snapping in. And you don't have to go that fast either. You can, right? But that can feel, when people first start breathing, they can get really in their heads, right? Because they think they're doing it wrong. And there's not a wrong way to do it. My mentor always used to say, there's no wrong way to breathe. There's no wrong, there's no wrong way to breathe. And especially with that blow breath or the bliss breath, stuff like that, people can get really in their heads because of that snapping and all of that. And so it's a really, halo active is a really solid one for starting off. And also if you make those in breaths and those out breaths nice and drawn out, it's going to be very down regulating.
Well, I know I kind of interrupted you earlier on when you were talking about examples of people and we kind of went forward. Did you have other things? I know we talked earlier again about you having stuff that you were excited to share about people's experiences with breath work.
That was my favorite one. I had one woman who was having so much pain in her knee, and this woman was really, really active woman, and it was really, really affecting her emotionally because of how much it was limiting her physically. And she had been to doctors and done all the tests and all the things and could not find any answers anywhere. And so she came to me and she was like, what do you think? Do you think that this could be, I have this suspicion that this is from the trauma that I haven't dealt with from when I had my daughter, when she birthed her daughter. There's a lot of physical trauma and all, just anyway. So I said, well, yeah, I don't know. Let's try. Let's see. And it took a while. It took like a month and a half, but her pain left her body, was gone entirely. Yeah. Yeah. There have been so many instances like that, right? Like it's just magic. It's so good.
It's exciting to hear all about, and I'm excited to try some. So
Yes.
do you have other things we haven't talked about that you would like to say before we stop the recording and open up for questions? I'm sure there's a chance some people have some questions of their own.
Yeah. I wanted to, like, I kind of got off on a tangent. I'm so bad about doing that. When you asked about people doing it at home, 100%, especially the shorter ones. Now, if you want to try, or I should say, I guess, if something presents itself in you that is feeling really heavy and dense and you're not really sure what to do with the energy and it's feeling scary or whatever, and you feel yourself sort of wanting to shut down or go into those old behaviors or anything like that, then that may be something that you don't want to breathe by yourself. That may be something you want to breathe with a guide, someone. And please, like, it doesn't have to be me. If you're going to breathe, ask them if they're trauma informed, and if they say they are, don't be afraid to ask for their certifications. Like, I have people who have come to me and they breathed with me for my practicum when I was doing my training, and they only breathed with me because it was me and they were a friend of mine and they wanted to help me. But they said, I want to let you know though that I've tried breathwork before and it was a terrible experience and I never wanted to do it again. And that to me is a tragedy, because this is to me, one of, if not the most powerful somatic healing modality that we have. And to run people away from it with that push through the resistance, push past the resistance, like, is one, dangerous and careless. And, I get upset about it. But yeah, so just wanted to name all of that you can do it at home. And if it's feeling like it might be super activating to breathe into, definitely breathe with a guide. Yeah.
Awesome advice. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us and telling us all about this. And I'm going to hit end on the recording so that people can feel comfortable asking questions. And then if anybody is here and you would like to ask any questions, we would love to have you.